Okay, I think that we've probably got about 10 minutes for a few questions, and I know that you've got questions just burning into your brain, but why don't I kick off first of all and pick up from Ethan's presentation, just to ask you a quick question first. So in your presentation, you have an observation that, you know, for brands in China, because it's a bit like the Wild West out there sometimes, talk about workshops in rural areas, etc., that in order to really protect their digital investments, you know, they're now beginning to really start to engage directly with tech providers, build their own data platforms, to try and, you know, enable them to maybe manage their own media and CRM activities. I guess the risk to the agencies is obvious, but what are some of the opportunities that you see that fall out of this for all of us?
Actually, most of the tech providers doesn't really understand that much of brands' needs, and that's where agency comes from. You know, so they need to work with someone that actually understands media activities, that actually understands brands' demands, that actually knows how to work within agencies and work within advertisers in their workflow. You know, they need to adapt that, and I think that's the value that agency people like you guys professionally they can create. You know, there's a very good bridge between technology provider and the brands. Agencies can play that role pretty well. I think that's key. Yeah.
Good to know. We can still earn a living in China for a few more years. That's always good. Moving on to Damien. Damien, you said that, or sorry, many people, including yourself, I think, have said that, you know, measurement systems are not necessarily keeping up with the growth of digital platforms. Do you think there's truth in that? And you know, what do we do about it if that's the case?
I think the measurement systems are keeping up. I think the challenge is that you know, and as Ethan mentioned, you know, we see that there is the availability, for example, of audience verification services in a market like China and in other markets, but they're not widely adopted. So I can only imagine that many vendors are struggling to build scalable businesses in those markets, and therefore are hesitant to launch more advanced measurement capabilities without any guarantee of significant scale and revenue behind that. Right. If you imagine cross-device, for a vendor to establish a scaled business in a market like the Philippines that's representative across the online population is a significant investment. And so if the adoption is not to follow, then it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. So, you know, we need the vendors in the markets, but we need the clients and the agencies to push the services and to commit to spending on that type of measurement service.
Okay, and just following on from that, I mean, and this is probably of interest to everybody because, you know, we all come from regions where you have more developed and less developed markets. You know, it's often been said that China and India are very different. And it's easy in some ways to kind of, you know, make a crass assumption that because it's all part of a region, that it's all the same. What's your view on whether China and India, and I guess China specifically, is indeed different to the rest of the region and should be treated differently?
I mean, you know, China is different in some respects, but not in all respects. Clearly, there are walled gardens within China that extend quite extensively, but there are also walled gardens in the other markets. Google and Facebook are walled gardens within the markets of Australia, US and UK, for example. So many of the challenges remain the same, and therefore forming partnerships, trying to break down the walls, using alternatives, forming data co-ops, many of the approaches are similar. I think India has less reason to use that as an excuse because the ecosystem in India is much more similar to in the other developed markets. So they can develop much more similar strategies in working with those global vendors because those global vendors have a presence in their market. Whereas in China, it is predominantly local players. But again, the principles of measurement remain the same. The challenges may be a bit more extensive, but nonetheless, the approach can be similar.
Okay, great.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Hello.
Can you say who it's for?
Yes, I'm Geneviève Petit from Petit Web in Paris. It's for Tsai. You mentioned Google as a tool for measurement. What is Google position in China and how do you use it?
Okay. Google simply, you can say, is not in China in terms of search. And it has been changed slightly. Last month, actually, Chinese government just allowed, when you search Google in China, you will be redirected to Google Hong Kong. Even though it's very slow, but that's a big breakthrough from what we see. But still, you cannot log on to Google in China. And you'll be redirected to Google Hong Kong with limited access. And Google Play is just about to start in China. And Google's other display ads, for example, like AdWords and AdSense are in China. But still, they're targeting on those. They have okay business in China, but simply for those Chinese companies going abroad. So not really targeting on local consumers. So we don't see it's changing that quick, and it won't change that dramatically.
Any more questions from the floor? We've got time for maybe one more. Oh, hands got up there.
It's Susanna from PhD. One of the most common issues is still phenomenon is transparency in the emerging markets, and that's a huge problem for all of us. So with all the models that you say we're developing into or can be better at, the challenge is really about what are we measuring with these models, because it's not available and we don't know how clean the data is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to fraud in one sense. And as I mentioned, there are a lot of metrics such as impressions that are subject to fraud, clicks that are subject to fraud, and even in China, conversions. But I think what's important from a measurement standpoint is where possible to measure against an actual business outcome. So if you're an automotive manufacturer, understand the impact of your media activity against sales of cars, which hopefully can't be fraudulently purchased or otherwise gamed in the market. Does that answer the question?
Actually, later today, there will be several cases we share, and we can share a very interesting case on how do you convert from impression all the way to number of cars sold, okay, which is, I think, that's what you have to measure all the way to the end of the business. And so, yeah, I think that's a real result.
Great. Listen, I think we're almost out of time, and I really don't want the Oscar music to play over us. So I want to just say a final word, which is, I think, whether it's in measurements or ad fraud, I think there are a lot more similarities than differences between Asia Pacific and the rest of the world. And I think more importantly, there's a lot that we can all learn from the experiences that the likes of Damien and Ethan are gleaning in markets like China and the rest of Asia. So they're around for the rest of the next few days. So do grab them and follow up with further conversations and questions. But for now, I want to say a big thank you to Damien and to Ethan. A big round of applause. Thanks very much.